Mr Neale Hanvey.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm going to begin where I left off on the 1st of February this year when moving my Scotland Self-Determination Bill, because it's important to establish how far this government and the party of opposition have moved from the principle of equity of all peoples of this alleged union of equals and ultimately against the democratic will of the people of Scotland. In 1889, in this place, the equality of UK partner countries was asserted by none other than William Ewart Gladstone MP when he said the following: "I am to suppose a case in which Scotland unanimously or by a clearly preponderating voice were to make the demand on the United Parliament to be treated not only on the same principle but in the same manner as Ireland. I could not deny the title of Scotland to urge such a claim." That principle of equity was at the heart of my private member's bill and was again articulated in Amendment J in my name to the recent King's speech. Each are consistent with the motion passed by this House that endorsed the principle of the 1989 Claim of Right, which acknowledged the sovereign right of the Scottish people to determine the form of government best suited to their needs. However inured this House has since become to the aspirations of the people of Scotland to live in a normal independent country, support for independence is holding steady at around 50% without a single leaflet being dropped through a letterbox. That number is rising steadily and will continue to climb. The independence genie is not for going back into the bottle. Of course, this growing support requires a mechanism with which to express its effect and place beyond doubt the will of the people. My Scotland Self-Determination Bill is explicit on the necessary conditions to bring that mechanism into play and is clear that the power to legislate for a referendum requires a democratic mandate from the Scottish public. Since 2014, that criterion has been met in successive general elections to the Scottish Parliament, most recently in 2021, when a majority of MSPs were elected on a manifesto commitment to deliver an independence referendum. And this evening, I intend to set out how that must now happen and how it can be put beyond the wiles of intransigent London-led parties for good. One of the most invigorating aspects of the 2014 independence referendum campaign was the explosion of interest and engagement in all aspects of policy and healthy workplace, coffee house and pub debates across Scotland. Back then, as a movement, we were unafraid to have differences of opinion, to propose various solutions to decades-old problems, and most importantly, we spoke truth to the distortions of the unionist Better Together No campaign. And that appetite for truth and facts is something we must now rediscover. Our movement must demand this if we are to make progress towards independence. The first issue that we must come to terms with is that another Section 30 independence referendum is not going to happen for the foreseeable future.
Correct.
As a consequence of the Scottish Lord Advocate's folly of arguing a poorly crafted question, the UK Supreme Court made it clear that in absence of an equitable mechanism of self-determination across these islands, as I have proposed, any referendum on Scottish independence is a matter reserved to London. Put plainly, yes, I'll give you.
I think the Supreme Court was in some ways perhaps helpful. I mean, what they did say in paragraph 81, and the reason they stopped it, it was the fact that if the referendum itself, while not having any legal powers, for not even having the government even signed up to it, the UK government signed up to it, the ballot box would carry authority.
Yes.
And because it would carry authority, it would then force the UK government to recognise that authority and therefore cause a change to the union. And by stopping the referendum in a way, they've now opened another avenue for Scotland. We maybe touch on this later, which are, of course, using elections.
I thank my honourable friend for that contribution, and that is a key element to my contribution in this debate this evening. Put plainly, a Section 30 order to temporarily transfer those powers to the Scottish Parliament is entirely the gift of Westminster. This underscores an unavoidable truth that our Parliament, in reality, is part of the fabric of the British state and is increasingly being squeezed under the heel of Whitehall. Securing mandates to ask for a referendum on independence only to be rebuffed is now the equivalent of Monty Python's parrot that has ceased to be. It is as stone dead as a mandate can be. The Tories have become increasingly bolder in this regard, and while they persist with the assertion that this is a voluntary union, they refuse to set out the means of withdrawing consent. This government have also made it clear they will plunder Scotland as a cash cow until the wind stops blowing. Westminster plans to rob our resources at their leisure. There is no way, even if the First Minister were to ask, that the Prime Minister would agree to an independence referendum in his final months in office. In a prior Westminster Hall debate on this subject, the Minister responding this evening claimed the benefits of being part of the United Kingdom have never been more apparent.
Tell that to Dublin. Tell that to Dublin.
Well, where is the benefit for the 1 in 3 households in Scotland living in fuel poverty? Where are the benefits for the north east of Scotland when the Acorn carbon capture and storage project still waits for a go-ahead from the UK government? The Minister proclaimed that Scotland has one of the most powerful devolved parliaments in the world, but Scotland remains powerless to stop the plunder. Meanwhile, the Treasury siphons off 11... by all means.
When he speaks about opportunities to improve the lives of people in Scotland, of course we could do that through our NHS, through our education system, through our justice system, through local government, all of the issues that are devolved fully to the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament, but of course they are ignored by the SNP and the Green Government, the Nationalist Government, because they are always focused on independence rather than the real priorities of the people of Scotland.
Yeah.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, but I would be the last person that should speak for the SNP government in Scotland. I would refer back to my party leader's excellent tenure as First Minister and the meaningful difference that he made to the lives of the people of Scotland. Yes, please.
Comparing a devolved Scotland and the United Kingdom, it's as silly as comparing the performance of Northern Ireland and Stormont within the United Kingdom as vis-à-vis Dublin and independent Ireland. Ireland, which has a €10 billion surplus this year, rising to €20 billion next year. UK with a deficit of around €170 billion, unable to build small hospitals in small Hebridean islands, whereas in Ireland they're funding nurses over the border.
On there.
Equally
happy to give him a row.
Yeah. Put him in his place. But anyway, the Treasury is happy to siphon off $11 billion in tax receipts from oil and gas this year alone, and is sending south, and we are sending south 124 billion kilowatt hours of energy, which is enough to power Scotland's needs 15 times over. As my honourable friend from East Lothian set out this morning in a Westminster Hall debate, with this union, it is all pooling and absolutely no sharing. And where, Minister, is the evidence of a share of Scotland's energy bounty? As for an incoming, you like this bit, guys, as for an incoming UK Labour government, now bedecked in Union Jackery, the Leader of the Opposition has made it clear his priority is continuity with Tory economic and social policy, and he intends to continue London's plunder of Scottish assets. Don't be confused. It was British Labour who first hid the truth of the Macron report from the people of Scotland, a truth kept secret by successive Labour and Tory administrations for 30 years. Neither party have protected our economy, our communities, so why should we trust any of them now? They each may persist with the claim that they have no selfish or strategic economic interest in the north of Ireland. But we know the opposite is true of Scotland, where the strategy is wholly economic and top to tail selfish. Any fantasy... Yes, I will get one.
Thank you for giving way, and I'm sort of sitting here seeing myself as a determined, strong-willed, proud unionist, and one who believes that the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is always better together, and Northern Ireland is part of that. I very much wish to see Scotland be part of it. The honourable gentleman and I will disagree, but does he accept that when it comes from the British government here, and the Minister will respond to it, the amount of money that comes from here to keep Scotland going, that can never be ignored. When it talks about the trade downwards, the trade is also upwards, and that can't be ignored when it comes to the financial implications. Better off together, always.
Neale Hanvey.
Well, I think the honourable gentleman hit the nail on the head. We will absolutely not agree on anything that he said.
I think in answer to that point, the Republic of Ireland is costing the UK nothing after leaving. Therefore, if Scotland goes, will save you a fortune.
Mr. Hanvey to intervene on the person who intervened on Mr. Hanvey. Mr. Hanvey.
Absolutely. Anyway, neither of these parties have protected our economy, and any fantasy that pleas for more devolution will be accommodated by Labour are also pie in the sky. North of Tyne Mayor Jimmy Driscoll recently accused the Labour opposition of censoring, diluting and striking down key recommendations contained in former Prime Minister and MP for Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath constituency Gordon Brown's report on the Constitution and further devolution across the UK. These forlorn attempts to prevent the break-up of Britain by refusing to devolve power away from London will only serve to boost the case for Scottish independence. Mr Brown's attempt to reframe the debate to one, and I quote, of change within Britain versus change by leaving Britain has been utterly dismantled by his own party leader and increased the urgency for independence. All of this leads us to the position where Scotland urgently needs a robust strategy that not only deals with the facts of the day, but overcomes that central Westminster hurdle of the denial of a democratic process. The Alba Party and our Scotland United colleague from Neale and Ayr believe that every single Scottish and UK general election must now be used to secure majority support for independence negotiations to commence. This could and should include the triggering of an early Holyrood election.
On that point.
On that point.
I'll intervene on the point. I think that he's hit the nail right on the head. The referendum door is shut and slammed shut. And there are three ways where the SNP government at Holyrood could trigger a plebiscite on Scottish independence. Of course, First Minister resignation is very awkward and very difficult, but a majority of two-thirds of MSPs can vote, or using Section 3(1)A of the Scotland Act, it can alter the two-thirds majority to a simple majority. And that was something that wasn't communicated properly in the light of the Supreme Court. And those who didn't communicate that properly should have set the record straight, or at least apologise. But I think they should set the record straight so that MPs, MSPs and the wider public understand that point and understand it clearly.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that, and my honourable friend for that really important piece of information, because what it underscores is there's a need for a much more robust and firm action from the Scottish independence movement to push forward the case for independence. As I said recently, independence is not going to fall into our laps. It's something that we have to pursue with vigour and absolute determination. But this approach reinstates the position of the national movement prior to devolution, and as with all democratic expressions, the threshold would be a simple majority of votes cast for all independence parties, a threshold achieved on the last list vote for the Scottish Parliament. Absolutely. This approach is supported by the expert legal opinion I obtained from highly distinguished academic and legal practitioner in international law, Professor Robert McCorquodale, that, and I quote, "The people of Scotland are distinct within the UK and have a right to self-determination. and subsequently the right to self-determination applies to the people of Scotland. Going on to state, as the people of Scotland are a people for the purposes of the right to self-determination, they can exercise it. The choice of the means to exercise it is for the people to decide, not for the state. Furthermore, Professor McCorquodale explains that the UK, as a signatory to multilateral international human rights treaties, has expressly accepted that the right to self-determination is a human right and not just an international legal principle, which is binding under international law on all states. These are not obscure and arcane legal points of law. They are precise and purposeful. I understand why the UK government don't want to hear the facts that Professor McCorquodale has set out, but I can't comprehend why others are steadfast in their refusal to even acknowledge this landmark legal opinion, charting the correct, lawful and democratic course to self-determination and independence. The Alba Party amendment to the recent King's Speech repeated the democratic principles contained in my Scotland Self-Determination Bill. That is for the recognition of the right of the people of Scotland to self-determination by amending the Scotland Act 1998. This would transfer the power to legislate for a Scottish independence referendum to the Scottish Parliament. Now, let me now deal with the supposed gold standard of a Section 30 order. A Section 30 on its own is not a gold standard. It was the process of negotiation and agreement that led to the signing of the Edinburgh Agreement that was the gold standard. And let me also be clear that any democratic vote in favour of self-determination is the only standard required, providing that it is the clear and unclouded purpose of any such vote. Unless, of course, the UK government don't want to recognise democratic elections as legitimate expressions of the will of the people.
On that point?
Yeah, on the point.
Angus MacNeil.
An excellent point he's making. An unscheduled Holyrood election would precisely fill that category and would make the world stop for a moment and see if Scotland was to choose independence or not. And that power rests with MSPs at Holyrood at the moment if they want to do that or not.
I
mean, the honourable gentleman is making, really important and valid observations, but these are the key tactics that we now need to adopt, because whichever UK Prime Minister comes next, while they may have every technical right to stifle, subdue or ignore the Scottish Parliament, the British state has no locus to limit the inalienable human rights of the people of Scotland or the march of our nation. Yet in this union, that is precisely where Scotland finds its democracy denied. And that flies in the face of commitments given by Margaret Thatcher in her Memoirs of Scotland. She said, as a nation, they have an undoubted right to national self-determination. John Major, when Prime Minister, said of Scotland, no nation could be held irrevocably in a union against its will. On the commitments contained in the Smith Commission agreement signed by all of Scotland's political parties, who agreed that nothing in that report prevented Scotland becoming an independent country in the future should the people of Scotland so choose. Scotland will only ever become an independent country as and when the majority of the people of Scotland choose that path. Yet that requires a democratic mechanism that is constitutional and satisfies international legal precedent. So, from Gladstone to Thatcher, no one until now has had the gall to seek to constrain the democratic right to self-determination of the Scottish people. I have made this point many times before, but it bears repeating. Democracy is not a single event. It is a continually evolving process that demands opinions be tested and retested regularly. I anticipate that the Minister will reel off the usual rebuttals and crow about we've had a referendum, but he should know this. As an option, a referendum has been put beyond reach by Westminster and Whitehall. Scotland will adapt. Each and every election from here on in can and will provide a platform on which the people of Scotland can have their say on consent to this union. Consistent with Professor McCorquodale's opinion, this would then pave the way to where, and I quote, a clear majority of people representing Scotland indicate their approval for independence, but it should be not done by the Scottish Parliament, as the latter is within UK domestic law. This could be done, for example, through a convention of elected and diverse representatives from across Scotland with a clear majority in favour. Scotland's separate constitutional tradition is best summed up in McCormick versus Lord Advocate. The principle of the unlimited sovereignty of Parliament is a distinctively English principle, which has no counterpart in Scots constitutional law. The UK government face a choice. Give serious consideration to bring forward legislation for an equitable mechanism for self-determination as exists on the island of Ireland, or face this test at every election in future. In international law and consistent with human rights declarations, the decision on Scotland is the purview of the people of Scotland, not any London party. In the constitutional tradition of popular sovereignty in our great country, it is the people who remain sovereign, and it will be the people of Scotland who decide. Thank you.